This is short end of the year review B. Number 1 says find the area of that shape, and that shape is obviously a trapezoid. You know it's a trapezoid because it has two parallel sides and a set that's not parallel. So those parallel sides are the bases of that trapezoid. Remember to find the area. Your formula is area equals 1/2 height times base 1 plus base 2. I always think about this as the average of the bases. If you add two things together and divide by 2 or take it times a half, you're finding the average. Because remember, a rectangle that's 22 by 16 is too small. A rectangle that's 30 by 16 is too big. We want what's directly in between those two things. So directly between 22 and 30, you could add that together. That's what this is doing. Taking 30 and 22, adding that together, that's 52. Taking half of 52, which is 26, and taking 26 times the height. And remember, the height has to be at a right angle, so we're looking at this 16. So in the end, our problem is 26 times 16, and that is 416. And since we're talking about area, it's 416 units squared. Another way you could have done it, you could have cut it into shapes you know. Now you'd have a rectangle that's 16 by 22. You'd find the area of that piece. Then you'd have a triangle that is this distance, 16, by this distance, which you'd have to go find. Remember, if it's 30 all the way, and this is 22 of the 30, then that has to be 8 of the 30. So you would take 8 times 16 and then divide by 2, of course, because it's a triangle. Then you'd add those two areas up. That's another way of solving that. Number 2 has two things on top of each other, and two things on top of each other means divide. There's negative fractions, which I always think you have to get the negative part right and the fraction part right, so it's a little bit more difficult. So I always put a box down in the corner and start to do my negative rule first. A negative divided by negative is going to be a positive. I already know my answer is positive. I like to estimate also. This is almost a 1, so how many 1s fit into 4? Basically 4, right? So your answer is going to be around 4 to 5. Okay? So to review, two things on top of each other means divide, and to divide fractions you have to go to improper fraction. So I'm going to change this to an improper fraction by multiplying and adding. I get 21/5. Then I don't divide fractions, I multiply by their reciprocal. So instead of dividing by 9/10, I'm going to multiply by 10/9, the reciprocal of 9/10. Multiplication is the one time that you can cross simplify. So I see that 5 goes in there 1 time, and 5 goes in there 2 times. And 3 goes in there 3 times, and 3 goes in there 7 times. And now I am dealing with 7 times 2, which is 14, and 1 times 3, which is 3, so 14/3. Or if we simplify that again, two things on top of each other means divide. 14 divided by 3 is 4, with 2 remainders, so 4 and 2/3. And there it is, just like we talked about, somewhere around 4 to 5. We already know our answer is positive. Number 3 asks, what does a $600 item cost during a 45% off sale? Draw a picture of that first of all. The thing was $600. We cut off 45% of it. That means we almost cut off half of it. And so we're looking for what this price would be after we cut off almost half of it. It's going to be a little bit over $300 because we didn't cut off half. If we cut off 50%, it would be exactly $300. So I'm going to set that up with a proportion or percent proportion. If I paid 100% price, I'd pay $600. That's why there's a connection between these two. But I have 45% off. So I could multiply and divide right there if I wanted to. I could take 600 times 45 and then divide by 100. And that would get me an answer of $270. But I want you to think about what the label of that $270 is. It's $270 off. So then I would need to take 600 minus 270 to get my answer, which is $330. The other way I would have set it up that I do quite a bit with you in class is I set it up the exact same way, but then when I realize it's 45% off and I don't want to know how much it is off, I want to know how much is left, I always say, what is 45% less than? Well, 45% less than is 100 minus 45 is 55, because 55 is what I'll still have to pay. The label will help you know which one to use. Number 4 is an order of operation problem with negatives. So I'm going to go ahead and do leave change opposite with any subtraction. That's my only subtraction problem. Then I'm going to go in order of operations, which states grouping symbol. So I look at this grouping symbol, nothing can be done. This is a grouping symbol called a fraction bar or a division bar that I will do. I want to do the top in order of operation and the bottom. So I try to do the grouping symbol. There's nothing, no exponents, no multiplication division on top, but there is addition subtraction. They have the same sign, so I add and use that same sign. And then it's a division problem with two negatives. So a negative divided by negative, that's an even number of those, so that's a positive 7. So that whole box just became a positive 7. I go on and scan for exponents. There are none. I scan for multiplication division. There's this piece that's multiplication and division. It has one negative in it. One negative is odd, so your answer is negative. That becomes a negative 18. So let me go ahead and copy my problem. I have negative 8 plus negative 15 plus that negative 18 plus that 7. And now I'm ready to add. I'm going to get all my teams together. So if I get my teams together, all these first three are negative, so I can add them all together. So 18 and 15 is 33, plus 8 is 41, so that would be a negative 41. And I'm ready to add it to a positive 7. These two fight because they have different signs. There are 34 survivors, and they're all on team negative because the absolute value of negative 41 is larger than the absolute value of 7. So we use that sign of the larger absolute value. Number 5 is an inequality that we will solve. We're going to be solving for j, but we'll solve it just like we solve an algebraic equation with one or two exceptions that we need to make sure that we include the label or include the symbol in our answer and understand that there are many answers, many possible solutions to this rather than just one answer like in an equation. So I'm going to go ahead and do leave change opposite. I'm going to do the distributive property, which leaves me 4 plus negative 6j is less than 35. Now, this is where I want you to go through those steps of looking at it and saying, we need to worry about flip, not flip, flip, flip. So if I look at, there is a flip because I'm going to be dividing by a negative. Whenever we multiply or divide by a negative, we have to flip the symbol. So this says less than, but it's going to end up being a greater than. So let me go ahead and set up my rainbow. There was this j that they took times negative 6. They added 4, and they got 35. So I'm going to subtract 4, and I'm going to divide by negative 6, making sure I hit equals in between. So 35 minus 4 is 31. And then 31 divided by a negative 6. That's one negative. So my answer is going to be negative 5 with one remainder, negative 5 and 1/6. And of course, we could do it with cancellation. And I should show that more often. So they would have done this, then this. So I start by undoing that to both sides. Those cancel out. I'll move that down here. Now we are at negative 6j is less than 35. I divide by a negative 6, and I need to remember when I divide by a negative 6, this thing flips. So it will no longer be less than, it will be greater than. Those cancel out, so now you just have a j over here. And same thing here, we're going to get that negative 5 with one remainder. And our answer is, if you can follow this, j is greater than negative 5 and 1/6. While we're at it, we might as well go ahead and do number 6. Because now that I know it's greater than, which is my answer, it's not going to be filled in. Remember, a greater than or equal to would have this symbol underneath it, and then it would be filled in and going to the right. But we don't have that underlined. We just have this symbol here. So it's going to be A, which is not filled in, headed to the right. And what that means is negative 5 and 1/6 actually doesn't work because it needs to be greater than negative 5 and 1/6. So negative 5 would work, and negative 2 would work, and negative 1.377 would work, and positive 3 would work, and positive 14 would work. Anything to the right of negative 5 and 1/6 is a solution to that problem. Number 7 asks, would the following points be on a proportional line? In other words, I'm just asking you if that's a proportion. Well, what do we know if it's proportional? I could graph them all, and hopefully it would be going in a straight line through 0, 0, right? Uphill, that would be a way, but these are going to be really hard to graph. Look how big the numbers are. And so another way to do it is to check it by doing y divided by x. If this is a constant ratio, when we divide them, then we're going to have what is considered a proportion. So I'm going to take 59 in that first problem, and I'm going to divide it by 5. 59 divided by 5 is 11.8. Keep track of that for a moment, because I'm going to do 295 divided by 25. I'm getting those numbers, the y divided by the x, and I get 11.8. So those two are proportional. If the last one is, we have a proportion. So I take 236. I'm showing you here, putting 236 as the y and 20 as the x, because remember these points come in the order x then y. And I take 236 and I divide it by 20, and guess what I get? I get 11.8. And since this is a constant ratio and does not change, we have what is called a proportion. You could even write the equation for good practice, y equals 11.8x with no y-intercept, because it's an understood plus 0. It hits the y-axis at 0, the origin. Number 8 says if the ratio of boys to girls in a school is 6 to 5, how many boys are in school? Well, I'm going to go ahead and take a minute and write that down. That's 6 to 5, and I have to go in the same order that they said the labels in, so the ratio of boys to girls. And I'm going to set up my proportion. I'm expecting to put a number of boys right there or a number of girls right there, but they give me a 407, which is the total number of students. This is what you call a part-to-part ratio, and then they mention a whole. Well, we're going to have to convert something. So I'm going to go back and look what I actually want to know. I want to know how many boys there are, so I'm going to leave 6 boys in my ratio, but my next thing is total students. So I'm going to go ahead and convert this to total students. If I take that first ratio, 6 to 5, there are 6 boys and 5 girls. Then I'm going to say, okay, well, that's 11 total students. So now I can put that in and have the correct label, because now the 407 matches right there. And all I have to do is take 6 times 407, then divide by 11. And that gets me my answer of 222 boys in the school. 222 boys.